Welcome to Break It Yourself. Today we're going to be going over some frequently asked questions about the Kamado Joe. And the first one is kind of not as much a frequently asked question anymore because Kamado Joe has kind of solved the issue, but this will be for all the old timers out there. And the question is always, what are these extra pieces in this baggie that came with my Kamado Joe? And the answer is that it is a disengage tool for the hinge. And definitely keep them. I think Kamado Joe has actually solved this issue, and nowadays they put a sticker on the bag that says, hey, this is the disengage tool for your hinge. Save it, keep it, whatever. But it is, if you've been in the Facebook group for any amount of time, I guess before the third version of the Kamado Joes came out, it was a question that came up probably weekly in there. It's pretty funny. So yeah, keep those. A next frequently asked question are gaps in the firebox. So if you have a version 2 or 3, you're gonna have your like puzzle pieces to put together your firebox, and a lot of people ask, hey, why don't these fit together better? They don't expect to see any gaps, and hey, the gaps are totally normal. Just try to get them even between all the different pieces of your firebox. It's totally fine. That is how it's designed. That's how it's made. It's no big deal. Another frequently asked question, is leaking smoke okay? Yes, within reason, of course. Seeing some around the gasket, absolutely no big deal. Seeing some even come out of the bottom. When you're initially starting up and there's tons of dirty smoke, yes, you're gonna see it leak. It's not perfectly like airtight, so it's no big deal, but you could have a Joe that maybe has like an overbite or underbite issue. So look at that. Generally, if the gaskets are touching all the way around, you're gonna be fine. Are these cracks in my Kamado Joe okay? Yes, happens to all of them. I think my dome temperature is off. Not to worry, that is something that you can check, and you also can calibrate. So you can actually remove the nut inside of the dome. You can take your thermometer and you can do a boil test on it. So you can put it in some boiling water, get it up to 212, and then there's a screw on the back so you can actually calibrate your thermometer. Another one that I've seen a lot is, what do I do about mold? Sometimes these Kamado Joes, if you don't use them often, they will get mold growth inside of them. And the answer is light a fire and burn all the mold off. A lot of times people will ask, what's the best accessory to get? Obviously that's gonna be personal preference. I would recommend the rotisserie because it is so unique. Not a lot of grills can do rotisserie, and it's something that I've greatly enjoyed paired with the Napoleon basket. So check that out, but they also have tons of other ones. So if you're into like searing or doing fish or anything like that, maybe look into a soapstone, maybe look into cast iron, something like that. But for me, it's the rotisserie. The next question, which will not be controversial at all, is which is the best lump charcoal? I've used a bunch of them out there. I've tried some cheap stuff, and I really keep going back to the Kamado Joe Big Block just in my area. I can get it at Costco usually when they have a road show. The stuff that I've tried outside of that, really not great just because the pieces are so small. I seem to burn through it very quickly. The Big Block, in my experience, has lasted the longest. Those big chunks last for a really long time. Is the grease dripping out of the control tower okay? Yes, it's totally fine, totally normal. Just clean your control tower. If you don't, it will start to stick over time. A lot of people have had issues with that, or maybe even with the paint kind of coming off their control tower. I haven't had issues with the paint coming off. Other people have. I would say whenever I go to clean mine, I just hit it with some dish soap and usually like boil it in water for a little while, a little soapy water, and then scrub it. I might do that once a year, maybe, and the thing works fine. Or you can do a high temperature clean, so you get your grill up to a high temp. That usually will burn off a lot of things that could be in the control tower. Should I get an iCommand? What is the best temperature controller? I've done the iCommand thing, and then I've also done Fireboard. Those are the only two that I've tried, and in that limited comparison, I'm a huge fan of the Fireboard. I wasn't necessarily a big fan of the iCommand in the beginning because it had a lot of issues on initial releases. Now it's much better, but I still prefer the Fireboard 2 drive. The next is temperature control. I've seen a lot of questions about temperature control, and here are some just common things to check. Are you using enough fuel, or are you using too little fuel? You'll actually be surprised that the fuel in these things can go a very long way. They're very efficient at holding in that temperature. So look how much fuel you're using. If you're not getting to the temperature you want, definitely look at airflow. If you have plenty of airflow, then you're probably not using enough fuel. Vice versa, if the temperature is too high and you're really cutting back on your airflow, there's a couple of things there. You might have started your fire too big in the beginning, like let it get too big and it's gonna take a little while to come back down. Or you just got too much fuel and your vent's too open, you're letting too much oxygen get there. I've been fortunate, I haven't had any issues with temperature control. I haven't had issues with airflow or anything like that. So check your vents and check how much fuel you are using. If you get an ash basket, do you keep the grate in the bottom? The answer is no. Once you have an ash basket, you do not need anything else. I really do like the ash baskets. I just have a knockoff that I got off of Amazon. I'll link it below. I don't know if I recommend it. Well, it's worked fine for me for 2 years. I know they have much nicer ones out there, but this one was much cheaper, which is why I went with it. But in general, I really like the baskets way more just because you're not clogging up anything with ash. The ash is just falling into the ash removal tray, which is great. So generally your airflow is just staying very consistent. When you have that cast iron grate in the bottom, some of those holes could plug up with ash. But then again, I never really had that issue too much. It's just more about cleaning in my opinion. So I would have to kind of get in there with the grate in the bottom and make sure all the ash fell through those holes into the ash removal tool. But now that I have a basket, all that ash just immediately falls into that. Pull the tray out, dump it, and that's it. So it's very easy. Another question I've seen a lot is what should I start with? So you went out, you got this awesome grill that's very versatile. What should you cook? What should you smoke? I would say if you're going for low and slow, I'd probably do a pork shoulder. They're very forgiving, especially if you're trying to dial in your temperature control and you don't really know what you're doing. Pork shoulder, definitely the way to go. The other bit of advice that is not a frequently asked question, but I'm gonna give it anyway, is that if you're just starting out, don't try to time a low and slow cook for a meal. We've all done it. I've done it. When I first started out, I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this brisket that I've never done before. It's my first one ever, and I'm gonna time it for dinner, and I'm gonna have people over. Terrible idea, terrible idea. You're gonna end up making shoe leather, and then you're gonna have to like order pizza or something. So the other thing is that it won't be ready in time. I've had that happen so many times where I'm trying to do a pork shoulder or a brisket, and it's ready when it's probe tender, not when you hit a certain temperature. So if you're starting out and don't have a ton of experience, don't go for a meal, just enjoy the experience and take it off when it's ready. I hope my answers to these frequently asked questions are helpful for you with your Kamado Joe. Thanks for watching Break It Yourself. As always, don't forget to thumbs me up, and we will see you next time.
Bacon.